What are the Four Noble Truths? Four means four, noble means wondrous, miraculous, truth means reality. The Four Noble Truths are four wondrous, miraculous realities. Additionally, the Four Noble Truths are also called the Four Holy Truths, four true realities, or simply the Four Truths. These are the four truths that the Buddha discovered, experienced, and declared about the nature of human existence. The origins of the Four Noble Truths. After 49 days and nights of meditation under the Bodhi tree, Prince Siddhartha attained the supreme enlightenment and became the fully awakened one, known as the Buddha Shakyamuni. He realized the ultimate truth, penetrated the reality of the Dharma realm, and understood the four truths of the world, the Four Noble Truths. At that moment, his mind was deeply serene and pure, completely extinguishing all suffering, defilements, and afflictions. With boundless compassion, the Buddha wanted to teach and spread this fundamental truth to all beings, to lead them out of the cycle of birth and death. Thus, the Four Noble Truths were expounded in his first sermon, known as the Turning of the Dharma Wheel, in the Deer Park at Sarnath, where he taught the Dharma to the five ascetics led by Kondana. He guided the five ascetics to attain enlightenment and liberation. From this moment, the Sangha was established, marking the beginning of the widespread dissemination of the true Dharma. The Four Noble Truths. The Buddha himself stated that he only taught four things: suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Suffering refers to the miseries we experience in our lives. Origin is the cause of this suffering, our untrained, clinging mind. Cessation is the Buddha's promise that we can end suffering by eradicating desire. The path consists of 8 steps, the Noble Eightfold Path, we must follow to achieve this goal. Throughout 45 years of teaching, from his first sermon in the Deer Park until his passing, the Buddha explained these four truths hundreds of times. He wanted to ensure that these fundamental truths were thoroughly understood by many people in different circumstances and at various stages of spiritual development. Once, the Buddha taught that not accepting the miseries of life is a burden. We create suffering for ourselves by carrying this burden. We end suffering by putting the burden down. The path shows us how to lessen this burden for ourselves. The Buddha also taught that suffering is like a disease. Like a physician, he diagnosed the cause of the disease. The cessation of the disease is the Tathagata's remedy, and the path is the medicine he prescribed for us. The first noble truth, suffering. The first truth the Buddha taught us is that suffering is inevitable. You might wonder, does this teaching about suffering apply in today's modern world with so many inventions to make our lives more comfortable? In the Buddha's time, people surely suffered due to basic necessities, diseases, and natural disasters. Haven't modern technological advancements enabled us to do whatever we want, go wherever we desire, and produce any product we need? However, no matter how easy and safe our modern lives may seem, the truth about suffering remains unchanged. It exists now just as it did in the Buddha's time. People suffered in those days, and we suffer now as well. We might label the Buddha's first noble truth in various ways depending on the context. Suffering, stress, fear, anxiety, restlessness, depression, frustration, anger, jealousy, abandonment, neurosis, or pain. All sentient beings, regardless of where or when they live, can face these issues. We can fall ill at any moment. We may be separated from loved ones. We might lose what we have or be forced into situations we despise. Parents, children, spouses, siblings, neighbors, friends, communities, and nations all struggle and conflict over money, status, power, and boundaries. Some of these problems arise from greed, anger, and ignorance. All are related to external conditions such as social, political, economic, educational, and environmental factors, as well as our internal state. Recognizing that these issues are unavoidable causes our minds great suffering. The core of the Buddha's first noble truth is to recognize and accept suffering as it truly is, without blaming others. He taught that to begin progressing toward happiness, we must face suffering with a steadfast mind and stable emotions, without resentment or discouragement. We need to confront our problems directly. Any circumstance in life brings a certain level of suffering to those who have not fully attained enlightenment. This suffering can be subtle, perhaps just a latent unease, or it can be very clear, such as attachment to people, possessions, or views. It all depends on how deeply rooted our greed, anger, and ignorance are, as well as our individual character and past experiences. For example, two people might witness the same event but have entirely different reactions. One might feel calm and accepting, while the other might feel fearful and anxious. Both happiness and suffering are created by the mind. Our minds generate our life experiences and either accept or resist this creation. That is why the Buddha said we create heaven or hell right in this life. Until we achieve enlightenment, many circumstances will bring disappointment to us all. Consider just 3 issues: the nature of human existence, change, and the lack of control over our lives. Accepting suffering as an integral part of life, without assigning blame, helps us maintain a balanced perspective. By understanding that suffering is a universal experience and a natural part of the human condition, we can cultivate compassion and empathy for ourselves and others. This acceptance is the first step on the path to overcoming suffering and finding true happiness. The human condition, the inevitable cycle of human life, birth, aging, illness, and death, brings immense suffering. People are not born into this world with radiant smiles on their faces. But as we grow older, the initial cries become less audible. It can be said that they transform into silent cries that accompany us throughout our lives. We cry for countless liters of milk, tons of food, meters of fabric, square meters of land to build houses and schools, trees for making books and furniture, and medicine for various illnesses. We cry for people to love us and for ways to satisfy our needs. If we were not born into this unstable world, all this suffering would not exist. Each child born into the world seems to bring a share of misfortune. The aging process also brings suffering. We might not remember the difficulties of adapting to a new environment or a new teacher, but we can clearly recall the challenges of physical and psychological changes during puberty. As adults, we must adapt to new jobs, relationships, modern technology, strange diseases, and new social conditions. These changes often occur before we have fully adjusted to the existing ones. Such unpleasant transitions seem common at every life stage. In old age, adapting to changes becomes even more difficult. It is painful to lose health and physical strength. We know we cannot escape aging, yet we still wish it wouldn't come. Thus, we suffer. The Buddha taught that aging brings suffering. The Buddha was truly speaking about aging and decay in general. We know that every cell in our body is constantly deteriorating or dying, while new cells are being generated. Every mental state also disappears and is replaced by a new one. Gradually, this process of decay and renewal weakens our body and mind, ultimately leading to death. Illness is undoubtedly a source of suffering. Everyone knows how painful sickness can be. Illness actually brings 2 kinds of pain: the fear of the disease and the disease itself. Thus, illness is a constant source of anxiety, causing us to suffer when we are sick and to worry and fear when we are healthy. People often think that pain and suffering are synonymous, but they are not. While you cannot avoid the pain of illness or injury, you can avoid the suffering caused by it. When you lessen your excessive attachment to physical sensations, you will suffer less when they change. For example, when Devadatta threw a rock and injured the Buddha's foot, the Buddha felt the pain. But because he understood the nature of pain, he did not suffer as an ordinary person would. The sensation of pain can often be controlled, but suffering due to a particular state of being is deeper and harder to manage. The next suffering in human life is death, not just the moment before dying, but everything that leads to it. We all fear death and worry about when or how we will die. We also know that when we die, we have to leave everything behind. Can we bear that? When a loved one passes away, we feel shocked, pained, and a sense of loss for years, if not forever. But the suffering of human life does not end with death. The Buddha taught that death does not put an end to the cycle of suffering. Someone who has experienced much suffering might say, near death, I do not want to be reborn again. But merely wishing for this cannot end the cycle of rebirth. As long as we remain ignorant of the true nature of reality, life will continue from one existence to the next. As long as greed, hatred, and delusion persist in our minds, the endless cycle of rebirth, the rotation of past, present, and future lives will go on. In this cycle, the sufferings we have described will repeat endlessly. The energy of all these experiences is like a burden we carry on our backs from one life to the next through countless rebirths. In each new life, the internal baggage is transferred to a new container. When we die, we cannot take any material possessions with us. However, the bag containing that energy, the imprints of all our mental actions and all intentional words and deeds from this life and previous lives, not only follows us, but actually influences the new life. Until we can empty this bag, until we can destroy all the consequences we have created through greed, hatred, and delusion over countless lives, we cannot escape death and the cycle of rebirth. We can use this understanding to motivate ourselves to act in ways that lead to lasting happiness and liberation. We know that greed and hatred are powerful motivators for action, but what does the Buddha mean by delusion? Why does ignorance play such a crucial role in the suffering we endure? In Buddhist terms, ignorance, delusion has two meanings: not knowing, such as not understanding what the Buddha means by the Four Noble Truths, and misunderstanding, such as believing we understand how the world operates when we actually do not. Not understanding the truth of suffering, we think that getting a new job, a new house, or a new partner will bring us true happiness. Not knowing how the energy of our words and actions follows us from one life to the next, we allow greed, hatred, doubt, and jealousy to control us. Not knowing that a simple life, disciplined conduct, good friends, meditation, and mindful observation of the true nature of our experiences will bring happiness to us in this life and in many lives to come, we find countless excuses not to engage in these positive activities. We are often unaware even of our own ignorance. After a particularly profound sermon on the nature of reality, Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, said to him, "Blessed One, this teaching seems very deep, but to me it is clear as clear can be." The Buddha replied, No, do not say that. It does not just seem deep, it truly is deep." Due to ignorance, Ananda's understanding of the Buddha's teaching was not thorough, and thus he did not attain liberation at that moment. Like Ananda, ignorance causes us to drift through the endless cycle of suffering in samsara. Change also causes us suffering. No matter what we do, change separates us from what we love and brings us what we dislike. Death and separation take us away from our loved ones. Friends move away, lovers leave us. These separations cause us immense pain. Losing something we cherish makes us sad and frustrated. Even trivial things can cause us distress when they break or disappear. Once, when I was 4 years old, I sat in the sand and used my fingertip to draw a perfect circle around myself. I was so pleased with it. My sister, who was about 7, walked by and erased my circle with her foot. I was so furious that I chased her, picked up a small but heavy chair, and threw it at her. To this day, she has a scar on her toe. All that anger, all those tears and pain caused by something as trivial and fleeting as a circle in the sand. It's not just about losing what we love. We constantly face people or situations we don't want, at least not here, not now. Having to live or work day in and day out with people we dislike creates a lot of suffering. Even things we can't control, like the weather, can make us frustrated. At the Bhavana Society in West Virginia, where I teach, people complain when it's hot and humid, but they also complain when it's cold and rainy. When it's hot, they complain about their skin and sinuses being affected. When it's cold, they worry about slipping on the ice. And when the weather is perfect, they complain about not having time to enjoy it. Looking around, it's clear that everything in existence creates suffering. Why is that? In reality, everything in the world exists as a result of some cause. Changes in air pressure, wind, and temperature cause rain. A tree grows from a seed because of the sunlight, soil, and water that nourish it. Similarly, our existence is the product of various causes and conditions. The direct physical cause of our parents' union, and the causes of the deep impressions we've accumulated over many past lives. The Buddha called these and all other things arising from causes conditioned phenomena, sankhara. He explained that all conditioned phenomena have 3 characteristics. First, they are impermanent. Over time, everything, mountains, insects, plants, machinery, deteriorates, changes, or dies. Second, because of these changes, all conditioned phenomena are inherently suffering. As we have seen, any change can cause suffering. Third, all conditioned phenomena are non-self. This last characteristic is the hardest to grasp, so let's set it aside for now. Impermanence is not difficult to understand. The issue is not the truth that all things are transient. Rather, it is our attachment to people or things, like my circle in the sand, that causes us suffering. For example, we might have just bought a coat we really like. After wearing it only a few times, it gets stained, torn, or forgotten somewhere, and we feel upset. Of course, a torn or lost coat is not a major tragedy. We can easily buy another. But what if it was a gift from a loved one? What if we bought it to commemorate a special birthday, holiday, or trip? In that case, we cherish it, and when it is lost or ruined, we feel deep sorrow. Talking about these things can sometimes make listeners uncomfortable. What about happiness, they ask? Why not talk about that? Why don't we discuss joy, happiness, and pleasure instead of suffering? The answer, my friend, lies in change. Because of impermanence, anything pleasant, happy, or joyful cannot last long. As mature, intelligent adults, we must dare to talk about what truly happens without feeling distressed. We must face the suffering caused by impermanence and accept it. Why hide it and pretend everything is rosy? By facing impermanence directly, we can see that it also has positive aspects. We can be certain that whatever situation currently exists in our lives will also change. It might get worse, but it could also get better. Because of impermanence, we have the opportunity to learn, grow, mature, teach, remember, and create other positive changes, including practicing Buddhism. If all things were immutable, no transformation could occur. The uneducated would remain uneducated. The poor would stay poor. We would have no chance to eradicate greed, anger, ignorance, and their negative consequences. So we understand impermanence and the suffering it causes. But what about non-self? How is it related to impermanence? The Buddha taught that all things in the world are non-self, or without a true self, because they are always changing. We and everything around us are not solid and unchanging. We cannot label anything in this world as I or mine because everything changes too quickly. With our bodies, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness, and intentions constantly shifting, how can we point to anything and say, this is mine, or this is me? Even the thought or belief, this is me, changes quickly. For practical purposes, we might say, I am here, or this is mine. But we must say these words with a clear mind, without being misled into thinking they indicate the existence of an unchanging self or mine. Material objects also change continuously. We might use conventional names and say this is a chair or this is a monkey, but these names are hard to reconcile with the ever-changing reality as we know it. More accurately, we and all phenomena are part of a process, a continuous flow of growth and decay, formation and dissolution. Nothing in this world or within ourselves is different or permanent. Observe your mind for a minute, and you will understand what I mean. Memories, emotions, thoughts, and feelings pass through the screen of consciousness so quickly that it is hard to keep up with them. Therefore, it is futile for the mind to cling to or push away these fleeting shadows. When our mindful awareness becomes sharp, as in a deep meditative state, we can see the nature of impermanence very clearly. So clearly that there is no longer any belief in a self. Some people feel pessimistic or frustrated when they hear about the theory of non-self. Some even get angry. They mistakenly conclude that this means life has no meaning. They do not understand that a life without the notion of self is the most pleasant and meaningful life. Once, I gave a manuscript to a friend who was a professional editor. I expected him to finish the work in an hour. Yet, 6 months passed without any news. Finally, he came to visit, and we took a walk together. When he did not mention my manuscript, I sensed it was a delicate subject. Cautiously, I asked, "Have you had a chance to look at my manuscript?" He remained silent for a long time, and then replied, "Venerable, I did look at it. When I got to the part about the theory of non-self, I became so upset that I threw the manuscript away." I was surprised but not angry with him. Instead, I let go of my attachment to the manuscript. He had discarded my work because of non-self, so I also discarded the self related to the manuscript. I was able to maintain a friendly, gentle, and gracious attitude. However, my friend became cold, closed off, and miserable due to his attachment to the self. Thus, you might also find it difficult to accept the concept of non-self. Yet, as long as you maintain the notion of self, Your life will be uncomfortable, stubborn, and closed off, while those around you will find you egotistical and unpleasant. You might easily get upset or angry when someone disagrees with or criticizes you, when things do not go your way, or even when people offer constructive feedback. Understanding the true meaning of non-self, you will feel more open and relaxed. You will find it easier to get along with everyone, even those from different nationalities, because you will not feel more or less important than others. You will adapt to any situation more easily, and people will feel comfortable around you. With a genuine understanding of non-self, you can feel happy and at ease regardless of where you are or whether you are treated kindly. Do not let the notion of non-self make you pessimistic or upset. For now, let's accept this concept as an intellectual understanding. However, with persistent practice of mindfulness, one day you will directly perceive the non-self nature, the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena. At that moment, you will forever end the suffering caused by impermanence. The Buddha and other enlightened masters have achieved complete enlightenment, proving this truth. The Buddha was completely free from the notion of self, yet he continued to live in society after his enlightenment. For the sake of common conventions and ease of communication, he continued to use familiar terms like I or mine. You can do the same. The name on your driver's license might not be an absolutely correct identifier guaranteeing a fixed identity, but it is a useful convention according to societal norms. However, when mindfulness helps you realize that the self you have fiercely defended is actually just an illusion, a continuous flow of changing sensations, feelings, and physical states without any fixed or permanent entity, then there will no longer be a you to cling to the impermanent things of this world. Consequently, there will be no reason for you to feel sorrow or suffering. Lack of control. If we could truly control our lives, we would have no reason to suffer. But we don't have that power. On the contrary, we often don't get what we want, and instead get what we don't want. We desire a suitable job, a comfortable office, a kind boss, and a high salary that lasts forever. But these things change, and we cannot predict when or why. We want our loved ones to stay with us forever, but no matter how tightly we hold on to them, one day we will have to part. To stay healthy, we take supplements, exercise, and eat well, but we still get sick. We want to stay young and healthy, believing that aging only happens to others, but time passes and we discover that our bodies are no longer the same. Whatever ideal circumstances we have, we naturally want to keep them forever. But we have no control over the law of impermanence. Everything in existence follows this law, and there's nothing we can do about it. Sometimes unexpected events happen that cause us distress. For example, getting stung by a bee, a TV show you were looking forward to being canceled, your car getting stolen, losing your job, a loved one being diagnosed with cancer, losing cherished photos in a fire, your child getting into a car accident or becoming involved with drugs, scandals, blame, shame, failure, poverty, loss of property, loss of love, a deteriorating body. So many unfortunate, unwanted things happen to us and to those we care about, but we can't do anything to stop them. You might say, that's enough. But I still want to add a few more points. If we look closely, we can see that even when our desires are fulfilled, they still bring suffering. For instance, you want a beautiful house, so you buy it, but then you experience numerous troubles. You have to pay the mortgage, taxes, maintain it, insure it, and keep it in good condition. But you don't spend much time at home. You leave early for work, and in the evenings, you might go out for parties or movies, returning home only to sleep for 5 or 6 hours before leaving again. Surely your house is large and beautiful. But you have to keep paying off debts, mowing the lawn, repairing the roof, and cleaning the garage. You got what you wanted, but are you happy? Take another example. A young man likes a girl, and she likes him. They both try to attract each other, but from the start of the relationship, they live in fear. The young man fears that his girlfriend might fall for someone more handsome, and the girl fears another woman might take him away. They are filled with jealousy, doubt, and worry. Is that happiness? There are countless other examples. Just open a newspaper. Read about someone lucky enough to win the lottery, only to live a miserable life afterward. That's why people say there are only two tragedies in life: not getting what you want and getting what you want. a realistic view. The Buddha endeavored to make it clear to us that all conditioned phenomena, sankharas, bring suffering to those who have not attained enlightenment. He listed the 5 aggregates present in every aspect of reality: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Form refers to all physical phenomena, including the body and everything we perceive through our senses. The other 4 aggregates pertain to the mind. At the end of his enumeration of all things that bring suffering, the Buddha said, in short, clinging to the 5 aggregates is suffering. What does this mean? Why does suffering pervade every aspect of life? According to the Buddha's teachings, whether we experience suffering or not depends on how we perceive and think about things. This process is very subtle. Everyone knows that they perceive the world through their senses. We commonly speak of the 5 senses, through which we hear, see, smell, taste, and touch. The Buddha also mentioned a 6th sense, the mind, which perceives thoughts, ideas, mental images, and emotions. What our senses actually receive are raw data of experience, or in the case of the mind, mental impressions of experience: colors, shapes, sizes, texture, hardness, roughness, or smoothness. Naturally, we know that each person has different perceptions depending on their state of mind and sensory faculties. For instance, a person with a cold may not smell or taste well. Someone with hearing impairment may not hear low-pitched sounds. Thus, perception is subjective and depends on the perceiver's faculties. We are aware of these differences, but the mind still deceives us. It makes us believe that our perceptions are accurate and reliable. It leads us to attribute the characteristics we perceive inherently to the object we are observing, rather than to the result of the confluence of various conditions, including our own senses. But there's more. After perceiving something, our mind immediately categorizes or judges it, placing the object or experience into one of 3 boxes. The first box is labeled as pleasant sensations, such as the aroma of freshly baked bread, a symphony, or a brilliant sunset. The second box contains unpleasant sensations, like the memory of a father's death, a headache, or the sound of a police siren. The third box holds neutral sensations, all phenomena and experiences to which we react indifferently. Naturally, our mind, which has not yet been completely freed from attachment, clings tightly to pleasant things. Due to aversion, it pushes away unpleasant things. Because of ignorance, avijja, it ignores neutral things. And we mistakenly regard all phenomena, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, as permanent, as having a self or soul, and as having the capacity to bring us lasting happiness or to cause us perpetual suffering. The Buddha explained the impact of erroneous or biased perception as follows. Dependent on the eye and forms, eye consciousness arises. The meeting of the 3 is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. What one feels that one perceives. What one perceives that one thinks about. What one thinks about that one mentally proliferates. With what one has mentally proliferated as the source, perceptions and notions tinged by mental proliferation beset a man with respect to past, future, and present forms cognizable through the eye. In contrast, with a realistic and genuine perception, there is no clinging or aversion. It will accept impermanence, anita, suffering, dukkha, and non-self, anatta, as they truly are. When we perceive the world with a wholesome view, we cultivate positive intentions. A realistic view is the best remedy. If we can see phenomena, things and people as they really are, with the characteristics of impermanence, suffering, and non-self, then no perception can cause us suffering. A realistic view is the aim of mindful meditation. Reality means not avoiding the unpleasant aspects of oneself and the world. Through mindful awareness, we practice seeing existence realistically, which means recognizing that it is not always pleasant, easy, or happy. Life is a mixture of suffering and joy. We note the physical or mental suffering as soon as it arises and observe how it develops. We also observe how long the state lasts and how it eventually fades away. Mindful meditation functions like a shock absorber in a car. If you are accustomed to dealing with the disappointments and sufferings of daily life, and understand that these events occur naturally, when a difficult or painful situation arises, you will face it with courage and composure. When you can look directly at suffering without flinching, you can also recognize true happiness. The second noble truth, the origin of suffering. The second noble truth, as taught by the Buddha, reveals that the origin of suffering is craving, which can also be termed as attachment, clinging, or desire. It doesn't matter what the object is, a delicious meal, a close friend, or a lofty spiritual goal. If you cling to it, you will experience disappointment and suffering. You might ask, where does craving come from? The most obvious source is instinct, the desire to survive, the craving for food, clothing, shelter, warmth, abundance, and satisfaction. This desire seems to be hardwired into humans as well as animals. Even plants seem to have some desire, as they always turn towards the sun for light and warmth. Another source of craving is social conditioning. All the views and values we learn from our parents, family, friends, schools, advertisements, and books, which condition us to believe that some things are good and others are bad. The strongest desires are based on pleasurable sensations. Life offers us many pleasures through each of our senses. For example, sight. Your eyes are pleasing and delightful. Visual consciousness is also pleasing and delightful, as are the eye faculty, visual objects, the sensation of seeing, the recognition of images, the craving for visual objects, imagined images, intentional thoughts, and so on. Similarly, the ears, nose, body, and mind also bring about pleasurable sensations. These sensory pleasures are powerful and compelling. The allure of beautiful sights, melodious sounds, pleasant fragrances, delightful tastes, and tactile sensations can create strong attachments. We chase after these experiences, believing they will bring us happiness. However, the Buddha taught that this very craving, this clinging to sensory experiences, is the root cause of our suffering. Every day, we have opportunities to enjoy pleasurable and delightful objects through our senses. Yet, we still are not truly happy. In this second noble truth, the Buddha advises us to recognize that clinging to sensual pleasures is highly detrimental to our happiness. He compared sensual pleasure to a bare bone thrown to a hungry dog. No matter how long the dog chews on it, the bone can never satisfy its hunger. Reflecting on this, we can see ourselves in a similar situation. No matter how many sensual pleasures we indulge in, we remain unsatisfied, always wanting more. How many cakes or sweets are enough? How many online games do you need to play? How many novels do you need to read to satiate your desire for enjoyment? How much sexual activity is needed to quench your sexual cravings? How much alcohol or drugs? Sometimes people stay up all night indulging in pleasures until they collapse. Have they had enough? Or is there always another thrill they haven't yet tasted? The Buddha compared sensual pleasure to a razor smeared with honey. To taste the honey, we might endure great pain. There are countless stories of people harming themselves, sometimes fatally, in the pursuit of pleasure. A few years ago, a news story told of a worker repairing a roof who, looking down through a skylight, saw a naked woman walking in her house. Trying to get a better view, he leaned over the skylight, slipped, and fell off the roof, sustaining severe injuries. Alcohol, drugs, adventurous travels, dangerous sports, not to mention reckless sexual behavior, have caused many to suffer. Furthermore, we cannot prolong sensual pleasure. Like a dream, it quickly fades away. It slips out of our grasp, leaving us with nothing but feelings and memories. Like borrowed items, we cannot keep them for long. Therefore, the more you indulge in any form of sensual pleasure, the more harm it brings you when time, change, or unavoidable circumstances take it away. Craving arises from sensations of pleasure and pain. When we experience pleasure, we develop a desire to hold on to and maintain it. When we are troubled or in pain, we desire to push away or escape from it. Because of our attachment to pleasurable feelings and our aversion to painful feelings, we constantly seek experiences that bring pleasure or avoid suffering. Once we find something that seems to fulfill this purpose, we become biased and discriminatory. This state of mind leads us to cling tightly. To protect and preserve what we have, people are willing to lie, harm, insult others, or even use weapons to defend what they believe is their possession. Desire also leads to psychological torment. As feelings arise from contact with what brings pleasure, through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, people start to think and reason, hypothesize, philosophize, speculate, and imagine. They become attached to false views and misguided beliefs. Reflecting on past pleasures, they create thoughts, beliefs, and theories full of desire. Some people become so immersed in desire that they vow to be reborn to enjoy all those pleasures again. Others, on the contrary, due to the painful experiences they have gone through, do not wish to be reborn. That's enough, they say. One lifetime is enough. I don't want any of this anymore. In summary, desire arises from ignorance, not knowing that nothing is permanent and not knowing that desire leads to suffering. When the senses come into contact with pleasant objects, the deluded mind generates a desire to grasp and hold on to them. The opposite is also true. When the senses encounter something unpleasant, the deluded mind generates a desire to flee or avoid it. Because of this intention, people engage in unwholesome actions through body, speech, and mind, regardless of the consequences. Due to desire, people distort the truth and evade personal responsibility for their actions. Taking responsibility for your actions. The Buddha's teachings on karma make it clear that accepting responsibility for our actions is the foundation for individual freedom and completeness. Refusing to acknowledge our shortcomings and blaming the world for our unhappiness will only immerse us in suffering. Everyone experiences dissatisfaction, but when you blame your parents or society for your problems, you give yourself a reason not to change. The moment you take responsibility for your circumstances, even if others contributed to them, you begin to move toward a more positive path. In my opinion, we distort the truth and avoid personal responsibility in at least 3 ways. First, we believe the external world brings us suffering. As a result, we direct all our efforts and mental capacities outward. We exert tremendous effort, sometimes becoming blind in our attempt to change those around us, as if their perfection would bring us liberation. Or we strive to change society, thinking that eradicating social evils will solve our personal problems. When poverty, war, and environmental pollution are eliminated, then I will be happy. Of course, the desire to improve society is commendable. Seeing the suffering of others, we empathize and act to alleviate their pain. However, we often fail to realize that in our efforts to solve others' problems, we neglect or suppress our own. Our rationale might be, there are too many social ills to fix, so we have no time to address our own issues. In reality, we lack honesty and courage to examine our true motivations. Those involved in social activism can be compassionate and service-oriented, but some may not recognize their true purpose. Helping those in greater need than ourselves can give us a sense of power we don't have over those who aren't dependent on us. The desire for power is a basic instinct. It requires great honesty to see how much of what we do for others stems from this motive. Recognizing the true intent behind our actions can help us focus on the most important task of setting our own house in order before trying to save others. The second reason we avoid taking responsibility for our actions is by insisting that we have no problems. We only care about our own happiness and goals without considering how our actions might affect others. Subconsciously, we might think that the external world is unimportant or unreal. If we could listen to our own thoughts, we might hear ourselves saying, "Only I exist, and only what I care about is important. Nothing else matters." We are likely familiar with individuals who claim to value certain principles, but act in ways that contradict those values. These people are primarily concerned with themselves. Some might openly admit that they are driven by the desire for financial success, power, or fame. However, they also find ways to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. They deceive themselves by believing that their personal goals are more important than anything else. They further delude themselves by thinking that achieving their goals will bring happiness, regardless of who gets hurt along the way. The third way we avoid personal problems is simply by running away from them. We all do this to some extent. Watching TV or rummaging through the fridge for food are common ways to avoid honestly looking at ourselves. You lull your body and mind with comfort and ease, then drift off to sleep. Time passes. Except for getting older and gaining weight, nothing changes for you. The challenge here is to have the courage to ask why. We have all used these methods to evade responsibility, finding temporary comfort and fleeting happiness. But none of these provide a lasting, true solution to our problems. Whether we try to change the world, ignore the world, or separate ourselves from the world, we cannot escape the ultimate responsibility for our actions. Life has its ups and downs, and we are the creators of them. This very tool we possess, the combination of body and mind, endures countless difficulties. The only thing we can do, according to the Buddhist teachings, is to find ways to improve the one instrument that has the power to bring happiness to ourselves and the world. That instrument is our mind. The third noble truth, the cessation of suffering. The third noble truth is the Buddha's promise that suffering can be eradicated. This cessation arises from the complete abandonment of all clinging and craving. Now that we have begun to understand the cause and effect of our actions and accept responsibility for our words, actions, and thoughts, we can see that we play a crucial role in ending our own suffering. However, at this stage, it is difficult to fully grasp what complete happiness feels like. What would life be like without anger or desire? The disciples of the Buddha also had such questions. Once, Shariputra, one of the Buddha's two chief disciples and an enlightened teacher himself, was having a discussion with a group of monks. They asked, "Venerable Sir, the perfect state of happiness that the Buddha calls nirvana is not a kind of happiness based on personal experience. How can something that is not experienced be called happiness?" Shariputra replied, "That is why it is called happiness." In other words, happiness consists of what is not experienced. The third noble truth teaches that happiness eradicates all negative mental states, all greed, hatred, and delusion. Ultimately, when we have succeeded in extinguishing the inner fires that consume the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, we will then experience complete and absolute purity of happiness. It may be difficult to imagine what that state feels like, but the only way to discover it for oneself is to follow the path that leads to that goal. Like most of us, the monks consulting with Shariputra wanted to know from the beginning what the end of the path would be like. This is similar to asking a little girl, "How does it feel to give birth to a baby?" The little girl has never given birth. She must grow up and mature to have that experience. She can speak a little about childbirth from what she has read or heard, but she cannot fully describe the entire experience. Even her mother may not be able to recall the exact experience of giving birth. She can speak about her own experience, but if the listener has never experienced childbirth, they cannot truly understand how the mother feels. The eternal happiness of enlightenment is similar. Only those who have gone through the stages of practice and have experienced it themselves can truly understand it. For example, if the little girl asks her father, "Daddy, what is your relationship with mommy like?" The father might answer, "Sweetie, go out and play. I'll tell you later." Perhaps when the girl has grown up and is of marriageable age, the father will say to his daughter, "Long ago, you asked me what my relationship with your mother was like. Do you want to hear the answer now?" The daughter replies, "No, Dad, I already know the answer." The daughter has grown in understanding. She has come to know the answer herself. If an everyday experience like the relationship between a man and a woman is difficult to explain, imagine how much harder it is to comprehend the complete happiness of liberation from suffering. Currently, our minds are filled with thoughts, concepts, and biases, most of which stem from greed, hatred, and ignorance. Trying to understand the profound nature of complete happiness before we have eradicated negative states of mind is unrealistic. We can only rely on metaphors, parables, and scriptures recounted by enlightened beings and try to reason to gain some understanding. For example, a long time ago, there was a turtle living among a school of fish and other sea creatures. One day, the turtle disappeared. When the turtle returned, the fish asked where it had gone. "I went to the land," the turtle replied. They asked, "What is the water like on land?" The turtle answered, "There is no water on land." "Then how do you swim?" "I don't swim, I walk." "Walk? What do you mean by walk? And did you see many fish there?" When the turtle tried to explain, the fish skeptically said, "No water, no fish, you can't swim, and you say you walk. How can that be?" The turtle replied, "You can believe whatever you want. As for me, I'm going back to the land." With that, the turtle left. Just as the fish cannot comprehend the meaning of land, a person still full of defilements from greed, hatred, and ignorance cannot understand nirvana. To realize it, we must transform all negative mental states and personally experience enlightenment. Currently, the closest experience to the happiness of enlightenment is the serene state of mind that we occasionally achieve when we let go of our burdens for a moment, when the mind is just mind with nothing else in it. The understanding we gain through reasoning during such moments can be compared to walking through a desert, feeling tired and thirsty, and then finding a deep well with some water at the bottom but no bucket or rope around. However, we are too weak and exhausted to weave a bucket to draw the water. Because of this, even if we can see the water, we still cannot touch it, let alone drink it. Similarly, when the mind is temporarily freed from greed, hatred, and ignorance, we can sense the serenity of nirvana, but we may not necessarily have the means to reach it. Eradicating craving is like finding the rope of compassionate mind. Liberating the mind from anger is like attaching that rope to the bucket of loving kindness. The strength in our hands is akin to wisdom, the liberation from ignorance. When we can combine these three qualities, we have the means to ultimately taste the complete happiness of nirvana. This state of happiness cannot be described in words. Its only characteristic is purity. It is unconditioned, uncreated, and unconditional. Therefore, the only thing we can do is to talk about what this state does not have. There is no greed, attachment, or clinging to things, people, or the past. There is no anger, conflict, enmity, or lust. There is no delusion that perceives things as permanent, self-sufficient, or as having a soul or an inner self. Those who are still under the illusion that they are enjoying life as it is in a world of suffering might hear this description and say, "So enlightenment doesn't sound that great. I'm not sure I want to reach that state. Are there houses there? What about families, schools, health insurance, hospitals, roads, and so on?" These questions have been posed to me. The answer has to be no. Those who cling to life and the endless cycle of rebirths do not have the clarity of mind to desire the state of complete purity. They do not understand the Buddha's first noble truth, that suffering is unavoidable, or his second noble truth, that the more we crave, the more we suffer. Without right view about these basic truths, they cannot comprehend the Buddha's third noble truth, that suffering will end when we eradicate all craving and attachment. There may be doubts about whether wanting to achieve enlightenment and escape the endless cycle of rebirth is acceptable. The answer is yes. This is a wholesome desire, known as the desire to be without desire. The fourth noble truth, the path. The fourth noble truth of the Buddha is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. The eightfold path, right path, brings happiness and peace to those who practice it. We will explore each step in detail later, but for now, let's take an overview. 1. Right view. This requires us to understand good actions based on cause and effect and the Four Noble Truths, and to see if they align with the Buddha's teachings in general. 2. Right intention. This directs us towards three positive intentions: generosity or renunciation, loving kindness, and compassion. 3. Right speech. This teaches us how to speak the truth and avoid harsh, malicious, or frivolous speech to help us progress on the path. 4. Right action. This provides principles for ethical living, especially avoiding killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and intoxicants. 5. Right livelihood. This explains why choosing a suitable job or career is important for spiritual practice and how to address ethical questions in business. 6. Right effort. This outlines 4 steps we can follow to advance our practice: preventing negative mental states, overcoming negative mental states, cultivating positive mental states, and maintaining positive mental states. 7. Right mindfulness. This involves the practice of mindfulness meditation, especially cultivating mindfulness of the body, feelings, mind, and phenomena. 8. Right concentration. This refers to the 4 stages of deep meditation that we can achieve in meditation practice. These 8 steps, the Noble Eightfold Path, are not just an interesting list of thoughts taught by the Buddha. They are our best hope for attaining enlightenment. If these 8 steps are something you quickly read through and then set aside, you have not grasped their importance. There is no teaching in the Buddha's doctrine more profound and significant. In fact, these 8 steps constitute the very essence of the Buddha's teachings. The 8 steps are often depicted as a wheel, the wheel of wisdom, as opposed to the wheel of endless cyclic existence. Wisdom halts the spinning wheel of samsara. The spokes on the wheel of wisdom are the 8 steps on the Buddha's path. The hub of the wheel is the combination of compassion and wisdom. Conversely, the spokes on the wheel of samsara are the countless lifetimes we have endured, leading us to realms of suffering. The hub of that wheel is the combination of greed, hatred, and ignorance. Both wheels are constantly in motion. We see all around us the unending cycle of birth and death. Plants, animals, and humans are continually being born and dying. However, the movement of the wheel of wisdom can be more difficult to perceive, though it is ever present. All around us, people are practicing the path to the Buddha's happiness. This wheel moves because of the strong practice of spirituality, always active and turning. The circular shape of both wheels symbolizes completeness. The wheel of samsara is an absolutely closed system, a perfect system for perpetuating suffering. Meanwhile, the circular shape of the wheel of wisdom symbolizes that the Noble Eightfold Path is complete and perfect. To liberate yourself from suffering, you need to practice every aspect of the wheel of wisdom. Simply reading about the 8 steps of the wheel, the Noble Eightfold Path, will not make you happy. If you try to keep a bicycle wheel standing still, it will fall. However, if you keep the wheel spinning by riding the bike, the wheel will stay upright as long as the movement continues. To benefit you, the wheel of wisdom must also be set in motion through daily practice. Conclusion: people suffer not because of a lack of material possessions, wealth, or fame, but because of ignorance. Ignorance prevents people from understanding the true nature of life. Buddhism provides a path, an escape route, and the means to unlock the treasure of one's own wisdom. The Buddha defined ignorance as not knowing suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. This, O bhikkhus, is called ignorance. Samyutta Nikaya Vi. Conversely, wisdom is the opposite of ignorance. From the perspective of wisdom, the interdependent relationship of the Four Noble Truths is clearly revealed. Seeing one truth is seeing the entirety of truth. The Buddha taught, whoever sees suffering also sees the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Whoever sees the origin of suffering also sees suffering, sees the cessation of suffering, and sees the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Whoever sees the cessation of suffering also sees suffering, the origin of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Whoever sees the path leading to the cessation of suffering also sees suffering, the origin of suffering, and the cessation of suffering. Samyutta Nikaya. This correct understanding is right view, which plays a crucial role in the practice of the Four Noble Truths. In other words, right view is the foremost of all practices. This clear understanding is also called the vision of the path. The doctrine of the Four Noble Truths is both a means and an end. It is a complete teaching full of humanistic values that brings confidence and vitality to people and society, both in ancient times and in the modern era. The characteristic of the Four Noble Truths is the middle path, which avoids the extremes of indulgence in sensual pleasures and self-mortification. The doctrine of the Four Noble Truths encompasses all the teachings of the Buddha. It can be practiced by both monastics and lay people. Anyone can cultivate it and taste the flavor of liberation, meeting the need to end personal suffering and transform society.
How did the Buddha attain complete enlightenment? Welcome back everyone to Mind Podcast. There are 4 stages or levels of enlightenment: stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. The arahant is the one who is fully enlightened with perfect and complete wisdom. A stream enterer is someone who has entered the stream of the noble path, from which there is no return, having set foot on the journey to higher and ultimate enlightenment. The stream enterer is someone who has seen the Dharma, who has attained right view, and is certain to reach enlightenment and full liberation within 7 lifetimes, including the current one. The once returner is a noble being who has advanced from the stream enterer, having seen most of the hindrances of desire and ill will fade away, so much so that they can reach full enlightenment in only 1 more lifetime. Therefore, once returner means they will only be reborn 1 more time. According to the commentary on the Anguttara Nikaya, all once returners are reborn in the Tusita heaven and will return to the human realm 1 last time before attaining arahantship. The non-returner is a higher noble being who has completely eradicated the hindrances of desire and ill will. If they do not attain full enlightenment as an arahant in this lifetime, they will be reborn in one of the pure realms, pure lands, to continue their practice and attain arahantship there. They will never be reborn in the human realm again. The arahant, the fully enlightened one, has completed their practice and has nothing more to do or achieve. This lifetime is their final existence. The 7 sailors on the shipwreck. The 4 levels of enlightenment were further illustrated by the Buddha in an example about 7 sailors on a shipwreck in the ocean, which has been recorded in the sutras. While the Buddha did not directly describe the shipwreck and the sailors, I add these details to make it easier to explain, without distorting the meaning of the Buddha's teaching. The 7 sailors were stranded in the sea after their ship sank. The first sailor drowned and died immediately. The second swam for a while, but eventually drowned as well. The third stayed afloat, keeping his head above the water. The fourth also kept his head above water and started looking around for a rescue island in sight. The fifth was also floating and had found the island, swimming toward it. The sixth was swimming, had also seen the island, and was walking toward the shore. The seventh had seen the island, swam toward it, stepped onto the shore, and was now resting safely. The Buddha explained the meaning of this example as follows. The first person who drowned immediately represents someone with a lot of bad karma, who after death descends directly into the lower realms, hell, hungry ghosts, or animals. The second person, who swam for a bit before drowning, represents someone who once had 7 powers but lost them. Those 7 powers are moral shame, fear of the consequences of evil actions, faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. The last 5 powers are fundamental spiritual faculties needed for practice. Because this person did not put in the effort to practice, they lost all these faculties and, like the first person, will also descend into the lower realms after death. The third person, who remained afloat, represents someone who still possesses the 7 spiritual faculties. This person keeps their head above the waves, which represent the ups and downs of life. The fourth person, who stayed afloat and saw the island from afar, represents someone who has entered the stream of the noble path, that is, the stream enterer, who has seen the safe destination of nirvana. The fifth person, swimming toward the shore, represents the once returner, who is overcoming the hindrances of desire and ill will and is on the path toward enlightenment. The sixth person, who has reached the shore and is stepping onto it, represents the non-returner, who is almost at the shore of full enlightenment and liberation. This noble being has eradicated all forms of desire and ill will, craving and hatred from the world of the 5 senses. This saint has almost completed their practice and is standing close to nirvana. The seventh person, who has fully stepped onto the shore and is resting safely, is the fully enlightened being who has completely eradicated all hindrances, craving, hatred, and ignorance, and all other fetters. These are like the arahants. This clear analogy from the Buddha contains valuable insights into the 4 levels of enlightenment. First, the Buddha emphasized the importance of the 5 spiritual faculties, including faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Faith, strength, mindfulness, concentration, wisdom, which are essential for practice and entering the stream of the noble path. Meanwhile, the Buddha also added 2 necessary qualities, a sense of moral shame and fear of karmic retribution. These 2 qualities were called by the Buddha the guardians of the world, because they help protect a person's virtue. Second, this example highlights the difference between the 2 stages of enlightenment, stream enterer and arahant. The stream enterer has only seen nirvana, whereas the arahant has reached it. In another example, the Buddha compared the stream enterer to someone who has seen the water in a deep well, but does not yet have enough rope and a bucket to draw the water. The arahant, on the other hand, has the full rope and bucket, and has drawn the water from the well and quenched their thirst. Third, the above example shows that the stream enterer must continue practicing through the stages of once returner and non-returner to progress to full enlightenment. Delusion and the purification of thoughts. Of course, the path from stream enterer to the fruit of non-returner is also the Noble Eightfold Path. At this stage of the Noble Path, the Eightfold Path truly deserves its name as noble, holy, because it is pursued and practiced by noble beings to the very end. The first part, right view, has now been perfected. Once the foundation stone of the Noble Eightfold Path has been laid by the stream enterer, the rest of the path can lead to completion. From there, the primary goal of practice for the stream enterer is to perfect the second part of the Eightfold Path, which is right thought. Right thought means correct thinking, proper mental conduct, and right intention. Thoughts of sensual desire, ill will, and violence must now be completely eradicated. Effort, mindfulness, and concentration must be combined to purify the mind. It is only after entering the Noble Path, only after becoming a stream enterer, that one can gradually uproot the remaining residues of defilements and impurities of the mind that have always dominated and distorted thought throughout countless lifetimes. For this reason, only disciples who have attained the stream enterer stage are called Sekha, a learner, one in training, by the Buddha, meaning that only from this point does the practice truly occur in a proper manner and truly lead to enlightenment. To further explain what needs to be practiced and why, I will add here the Buddha's teachings on delusion. We can refer to it as delusion, misconception, error, false belief, or illusion. Here, the process of perception consists of three parts: views, perception, and thoughts. The Buddha observed how views guide perceptions, perceptions guide thoughts, and thoughts guide views again. Thus, incorrect views, wrong view, will distort perception to align with those views. Perceptions are the building blocks of thoughts. Therefore, from incorrect perceptions, people build incorrect thoughts. Then those thoughts are used to adjust a person's views. As a result, these incorrect thoughts continue to reinforce the original incorrect view. And so, this cycle of wrong views leading to wrong perceptions and then wrong thoughts continues seemingly endlessly. The unfortunate and unseen part of this phenomenon is that few people are aware of this truth unfolding in their minds. Crude perceptions are the initial raw evidence provided by the senses, and they assume those perceptions are always accurate. This wonderfully explains why everyone thinks they are right. For example, when one hates someone, a wrong view, their perception of that person and their thoughts about that person are also formed based on that hatred. In the end, those thoughts only further reinforce that view. Hatred. The clearest example is of people who, after divorcing, often carry hatred and their view of their former spouse as evil. From there, their perceptions and thoughts about that person are also very negative, even going so far as to refer to that person with very harsh and false terms, as you may have heard. Another example. There are people who, due to their religious beliefs, often claim that in their sleep, or at some point, they have encountered their God. This might also be due to their worldview about religion, influencing their perceptions and thoughts. I've read and heard many Buddhists in China and Hong Kong recount that they have encountered manifestations of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, Guanyin. Similarly, some Christians might claim that they have met Jesus Christ or the Virgin Mary. All of this could be explained by their religious worldview. Naturally, it is rare for a Buddhist to dream of someone they believe to be Jesus. And likewise, it is uncommon for followers of another religion to claim they dreamt of a deity and assumed it was the Buddha. Worldviews shape perceptions and thoughts accordingly. The four aspects of ignorance. The Buddha was particularly concerned with the distortion in perception, delusion, misconception, that creates ignorance about a self, about pleasure, about permanence, and about beauty. For instance, when a person is still attached to the belief that there is a self, a soul, residing inside, this wrong view bends perception to affirm that there is a real self. As a result, we always think of things in terms of self, mine, and myself, which only reinforces this wrong view of self-attachment. Everyone learns the Buddha's teachings on non-self, but sadly, even these teachings spoken by the Buddha himself do not easily shake the deeply ingrained wrong views that have resided in the human mind for countless ages. It requires a revolutionary change in perception to establish a new way of understanding, and this can only be achieved through the deep states of meditation, jhana. Only through deep meditation can practitioners truly see correctly and perceive correctly the truth of non-self as it actually is. In summary, the Buddha taught that ignorance consists of the following four aspects. A. Perceiving non-self as a self. B. Perceiving the impermanent as permanent. C. Perceiving suffering as pleasure. D. Perceiving the ugly or impure as beautiful. Each of these erroneous perceptions manifests in varying degrees of awareness, views, perceptions, and thoughts. This is the problem of humanity. These four layers of ignorance can be broken at the level of views, right at the point of clinging to wrong views. Practitioners can use the deep meditative state of jhana to overcome all five hindrances and generate a kind of unbiased, undistorted perception. At that point, they will see phenomena as they truly are. Thus, right view is established upon entering the stream. The stream enterer is someone who no longer holds the four wrong views of A. Taking non-self to be self, taking the impermanent to be permanent, C. Taking suffering to be pleasure, D. Taking the impure or ugly to be beautiful. However, this does not mean that the stream enterer no longer has thoughts of desire or anger. At this level, they still have some amount of desire and anger. When the stream enterer's views have been purified into right view, it does not mean that their perception and thinking are immediately pure and entirely correct. For the learners, Seika, sometimes their perceptions and thoughts are positively influenced by the right view realized when entering the stream, but at other times their perceptions and thoughts are still affected by lingering wrong views, previously held wrong views, which are deeply rooted tendencies and habits that have been ingrained for a long time. It takes time to unravel these habitual tendencies and heavy shackles, at the latest within 7 lifetimes from entering the stream. It is not uncommon for stream enterers to recognize lustful thoughts when they arise and immediately regard them as distractions, loss of mindfulness. In other words, they understand that at those moments, their mind is temporarily disconnected from right view and has fallen back into the deeply ingrained habitual tendencies of their previous lives. The entire process of purifying perception and thoughts of lust and anger is the path of the stream enterer progressing to the fruit of non-returner. Technically, this means maintaining the Dharma that was realized upon entering the stream and keeping the Dharma always present through continuous, uninterrupted mindfulness. Continuous, unbroken mindfulness can only be well maintained through the deep meditative state of jhana and diligent effort, combined with the support of moral virtue. This is the formula: effort, morality, concentration, wisdom. This is akin to the act of swimming to the shore, as described in the example of the 7 shipwrecked sailors. Effort, mindfulness, and jhana concentration gradually dissolve all thoughts of sensual desire, anger, and violence, wrong thoughts, to the point that they can no longer arise. At this stage, the second part of the Noble Eightfold Path, right thought, has been perfected. The practitioner becomes a non-returner. Now, all that remains is to take a short walk to completely step out of the water and fully reach the shore. The non-returner, after the first 2 parts of the Noble Eightfold Path have been perfected, the next 3, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, must also be completed. This order of practice is due to the fact that all bodily actions and speech arise from thoughts, right thought. Therefore, when thoughts are purified from sensual desire and ill will, becoming right thought, speech and actions are also cleansed of those 2 impurities. Additionally, the Buddha stated that a non-returner has fully perfected morality, sila, fully perfected concentration, samadhi, but has not yet completely perfected wisdom, pining. Thus, the last 3 parts of the Noble Eightfold Path, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, collectively known as the meditation group, must also be perfected. By this point, the non-returner has cleansed, purified the entire path. All the factors have been completed and are ready. The only task left is to realize nirvana. So what does a non-returner look like? In the scriptures, most of the detailed descriptions of non-returners refer to lay Buddhists. In the Anguttara Nikaya, a layperson named Uga in the city of Vesali had 4 wives and still attained the fruit of non-returner. Afterward, he told his wives that he could no longer be a husband and advised them to either stay in the house as sisters, return to their families, or marry someone else, according to their choice. By definition, non-returners naturally live a celibate life, and no longer engage in any sexual contact with the opposite gender. The scriptures also recount how Uga's natural humility as a non-returner led him to always maintain the highest respect for all monks and nuns in the Sangha, even those who had not yet attained the noble fruit like he had. In the Khuddaka Nikaya, there is an account of a layman named Siddha who also attained the fruit of non-returner, and he could enter the 4 jhanas at will for as long as he wished. In the Digha Nikaya, a potter named Gadikara was also a non-returner. He was an exemplary practitioner, but the only thing that prevented him from becoming a monk was his duty to care for his blind parents. He upheld the 5 precepts, lived celibately, ate only 1 meal in the morning, and had no dealings with money. In this way, he practically lived like a novice monk. After crafting a few pottery jars, he would say, "Whoever needs these, take them, and if you feel inclined, give me some food in return." What a beautiful heart. This was how he sustained himself and cared for his blind parents. In the Anguttara Nikaya, there is a record of a laywoman named Nandamata, who was a non-returner. When the king's soldiers killed her only son right before her eyes, she harbored no anger toward the murderers. This noble woman also had the ability to enter the jhanas at any time and remain in them for as long as she wished. Thus, we see that even lay people who are non-returners behave as though they no longer belong to this world. They have almost completely let go, nearly to the point of transcendence. Let's return to the topic of delusion or misperception as explained earlier. For the non-returner, ignorance still operates, but only at the level of perception and thought. Their right view, however, has forever transcended ignorance since entering the stream. Therefore, non-returners may still have perceptions and thoughts involving sensual desire, but these are not the desires of the 5 sense world, the 5 sensual pleasures. These desires belong to the world of jhana meditative states and the attachments to the formless attainments. You can refer to the list of fetters. Furthermore, non-returners may still perceive and think with the notion of I am. These perceptions and thoughts give rise to the doer, the self, which in turn creates dissatisfaction and unrest in the mind. Because as long as there are perceptions or thoughts about an I am, the practitioner of the mind will still feel dissatisfaction and unrest due to desires and concerns for the self, fearing that this self is not fulfilled and at peace. For this reason, non-returners are said to still be bound by certain fetters, specifically the 5 heavy fetters: ignorance, attachment to the jhana realms, attachment to the formless attainments, identity view, pride, and restlessness, anxiety. To clarify further, in practice, non-returners need to continue following the noble path, utilizing the combination of right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration to maintain in their mind the wisdom that was first realized when they entered the stream, maintaining the stream entry wisdom. Specifically, they must hold the understanding that suffering exists even in the jhana realms of the form world, and that suffering also permeates the formless attainments. The realization of this fact arises clearly enough to give rise to dispassion, turning the mind away from and abandoning even these supernormal states of existence, because they are still impermanent. Maintaining the wisdom about the nature of suffering in the form and formless meditative states. They must also continuously maintain in their mind the teaching of non-self, until this teaching becomes firmly and continuously established in the mind at all levels of perception and thought, maintaining the wisdom about non-self. When all of this is perfected, the mind becomes completely purified. The practitioner attains arahantship. As summarized in a simple verse from the scriptures, do no evil, cultivate what is good, purify your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. Ultimately, the practice of Buddhism is about cultivating and purifying the mind. Rapid enlightenment. Sometimes there are noble beings who progress straight from stream enterer to full enlightenment without passing through the stages of once returner and non-returner. Using the example of the 7 shipwrecked sailors, a rapid enlightenment case could be compared to someone who swims directly to the shore without needing to walk from the shallow water to the beach. It's as if they swam close to shore and a powerful wave lifted them up and carried them straight to land. One example of such rapid enlightenment is that of Ananda, the Buddha's close attendant. After the Buddha's parinirvana, the Sangha held a council to compile the Buddha's teachings into scriptures. This council consisted of 500 monks, 499 of whom were arahants, but Ananda had not yet attained arahantship. The night before the council's opening, Ananda tried meditating throughout the night to attain full enlightenment. However, as dawn approached, he felt he had not made any progress. He gave up and decided to rest. And just as he was lying down with his feet off the ground, he fully realized enlightenment, becoming the 500th arahant in the council that compiled the scriptures. This was a special case. I can use the following example of the donkey and the carrot to explain this case. In old Europe, donkeys were often used to pull carts. Donkeys are known to be stubborn, so when pulling a heavily loaded cart, people used a trick to motivate them. They would hang a carrot in front of the donkey's face, just beyond reach, so the donkey would try to catch the carrot and thus pull the cart forward. But the donkey could never eat the carrot, as it moved along with the cart at the same speed. However, the donkey who practices the Buddha's path knows how to catch the carrot. They run at full speed, putting in all their effort and concentration. Of course, the carrot moves at full speed too. At the moment they reach their fastest pace, the Buddhist donkey lets go of all desire. They stop suddenly, and by natural inertia, the carrot swings forward. The carrot swings further out, but the Buddhist donkey waits patiently, with faith and wisdom, and the continuous practice of mindfulness. The carrot will swing back toward their mouth. Observing patiently, the donkey watches the carrot swing forward and then back with its greatest amplitude. The donkey simply waits patiently, doing nothing while the carrots swing back and forth. Eventually, when the oscillation reaches its peak, the carrots break free and fall behind. The donkey only needs to open its mouth and enjoy chewing them. That is how the Buddhist donkeys know how to apply the Dharma to obtain those carrots. In the story of Venerable Ananda, he spent the whole night striving to grasp the carrot of nirvana through continuous meditation. However, the harder he chased, the more elusive enlightenment became. He gave up and took a short rest, and nirvana swung even further away. But just as he was lying down, the carrot of nirvana swung back and fell right into his mouth. According to this famous story, Venerable Ananda attained enlightenment at the very moment his head touched the pillow, tasting the sweet fruit of nirvana. Arahant, the fully enlightened one. Complete enlightenment means that the person no longer holds the view of a self and does not perceive anything based on the idea of a self or think of anything as self or mine. Because there is no longer any notion of self or mine, an arahant does not possess or accumulate belongings, personal items, or wealth like others. I recall my teacher, Ajahn Chah, at the peak of his fame as an accomplished monk, who was still very lively and received many precious gifts from renowned figures, generals, prime ministers, and wealthy business people, but he never kept anything. Once, he called me to his room, and I was truly astonished to see only a sleeping mat, a few robes, and an alms bowl. It would have taken him less than a minute to pack up all his belongings. The room looked as if no one lived there, reflecting the mind of an arahant. 9 things an arahant cannot do. There are 9 things, by nature and by definition, that an arahant cannot do. Accumulating wealth, intentionally killing, stealing, engaging in sexual relations, deliberately lying or speaking falsely, acting out of greed, acting out of anger, acting out of ignorance, and acting out of fear. For example, because all greed has been eradicated, there is not the slightest trace of lust left regarding sexual matters. All arahants are entirely free from lust. Moreover, an arahant has completely eradicated the 3 forms of identity view, pride, I am better, I am worse, and I am equal, and has also eliminated self-doubt or inferiority, which is seen as a reversed form of identity view. Essentially, an arahant no longer perceives things in terms of I am. They see their body and mind as just a non-personal, natural process. Therefore, to them, it makes no sense to compare one process to another, just as it is meaningless to compare the value of a log to the value of a mango. Regarding these 3 forms of identity view, when one attains full enlightenment, all comparisons between non-personal processes cease. Even previous complex discussions, such as whether an arahant is superior or inferior to a bodhisattva, also come to an end. An arahant lives as a truth, embodying non-self, beyond all measurement and comparison. Elitism, the idea that the enlightened are the elite of society, has no place among the fully enlightened. They have no concept of it, so how could they think of it? Thus, we can trust in the complete humility of an arahant. The following story from the scriptures illustrates this well. Venerable Sariputta was a renowned arahant, known as the foremost in wisdom. One morning, he was out for alms, but his robe had not been fastened properly. A very young monk noticed and scolded the venerable elder. Instead of retorting, "Who are you to criticize me?" Venerable Sariputta checked his robe. He walked into a bush, adjusted his robe, and returned to thank the young novice as if he were a teacher. This beautiful gesture of humility is a mark of an arahant. Arahants and fame. An arahant, having transcended all perception of the self, has no notion of needing fame. Their mind is liberated, free from any desire to impress anyone. They are also fearless, as they have nothing left to lose, having completely liberated themselves. The following verses from the Theragatha Sutta describe an arahant who is fearless and unshaken. This is the elder Adimutta, and here is the exchange between him and the bandit. Bandit, all those we have killed before, whether for sacrifice or robbery, have trembled and wept in fear. But you seem unafraid. Your face even shines calm and serene without weeping when facing the great disaster of death. I no longer suffer in the mind, having left all desires behind. And O chief, I have surpassed all fear as I am no longer bound to life. When the cause of rebirth has been destroyed and wisdom sees all things as they truly are, what is left to fear from death? It is as though a burden has been laid down. For me, the holy life has been well practiced, and the noble path has been fully cultivated. I have no fear of death, just as there is no fear when a disease is cured. For me, the holy life has been well practiced, and the noble path has been fully cultivated. I see life as meaningless and trivial. I have vomited up the poisons I once drank. For one who has crossed to the other shore, there is no clinging. All duties have been completed, and the streams of outward flowing thoughts have ceased. There is only joy at the end of life, like one who escapes the blade at their neck. I have realized the ultimate truth, and the world no longer holds anything that entices me. When death comes without any anxiety, it brings liberation, like being rescued from a burning house. The great hermit has made it clear. Whatever arises, wherever life is achieved, none of it is created by a god. Whoever understands this truth as the Buddha taught, does not cling to life, just like a wise person does not pick up a burning iron ball. For me, there are no thoughts of I have been or I will be. So when mental activities cease, what is there to lament? It is merely the arising of phenomena, just the existence of conditioned processes due to causes. When I have seen them as they truly are, what is there left to fear, O chief? When a person with wisdom looks at the world, it is like someone looking at a pile of dry grass. They see nothing as belonging to them. There is no sorrow, for nothing is mine. I have grown tired of this body. I have become disillusioned with it. Rebirth is no more. This body will dissolve and there will be no new body. Do what you wish, kill me if you like, but whether I am alive or dead, I will neither hate nor care. After hearing these strange, hair-raising words, the bandits put down their swords and said, "Venerable sir, how have you achieved this, and who is your teacher, whose teachings have guided you to liberation from all sorrow?" Arahant Adimutta, the all-knowing and all-wise one, the conqueror and the victor, the great compassionate one, is my teacher. He is my master and the healer of the world. He taught this incomparable dharma, which leads to cessation, nirvana. Whoever follows his teachings will be freed from all sorrow. After hearing these words, skillfully spoken by the monk, the bandits laid down their swords and weapons. Some abandoned killing and robbery, while others renounced worldly life and became monks. These people followed the Buddha's dharma, developing the factors of enlightenment, the faculties, wisdom, and higher states of mind with joyful hearts. When the faculties were fully perfected, they reached the state of the deathless, nirvana. What motivates the creation of an arahant? People often describe the state of complete enlightenment by listing what an arahant cannot do, but it is equally important to explain the types of behaviors an arahant typically displays. At their core, The behaviors of arahants are expressions of boundless loving-kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha. These are the four sublime abodes of the mind, also called the four Brahma Viharas, which continually inspire and manifest in every action of an arahant, whether they are teaching, serving others, eating, sleeping, or performing any task they are asked to do. As for me, I can say that I was incredibly fortunate to live and practice in Thailand from 1974 to 1983, during which time I met arahants. I recall one arahant who was very famous for his supernatural abilities. Psychic powers often accompany the fully enlightened ones, but not always. Specifically, that particular arahant was believed to have the ability to read others' minds. Reflecting on this, I felt a bit hesitant, even fearful, when meeting an arahant like that. After all, the mind of a young practitioner like myself at that time was not exactly something worth an arahant's insight, especially in front of others. But when I actually met this being, who could hardly still be called a sentient being, all my fears disappeared. I felt calm, peaceful, and welcomed, even though I was still an ordinary, flawed person. This is because arahants never look down on others. Their three types of pride, superiority, inferiority, and equality, have been eradicated, and it is incredibly pleasant to be near them. Everything they radiate is compassion and wisdom. Meeting a true arahant is one of the most uplifting and pleasant experiences for anyone. Later, a fellow monk described an arahant using another extraordinary but accurate and logical example. He said that most people seem to surround themselves with sharp, hard spikes for protection, preventing others from getting too close. When they enter a room, people feel uneasy and uncomfortable. Gentler people still protect themselves, but their spikes are softer and duller, causing less harm to others. Lastly, there are those who have no spikes or defenses at all. These are the arahants. They are soft and tender. An arahant is like a wise grandfather, a spiritual father, completely wise and gentle, with absolutely no trace of anger, always caring and full of compassion for others' well-being as if it were their own. Those who have the opportunity to meet such arahants never want to leave their presence. The end of all suffering, the cessation of suffering. That is what arahants are like, and if you are fortunate enough to meet one, you will experience the happiest person in the world. But what are the internal experiences of an arahant? Have they truly been completely liberated from all suffering? The answer is no, and this might surprise many who are interested. Indeed, arahants have not been entirely freed from all suffering. To explain the difference between an arahant and others, the Buddha used the example of two spears. When a person is struck by one spear or arrow, they naturally experience great pain. But if they are struck by a second spear, the pain is doubled. The two spears or arrows represent physical pain and mental pain. Normally, when someone experiences physical pain, they immediately also experience mental pain. Suffering of the body leads to suffering of the mind. This is like being struck by two arrows at once. However, for arahants and non-returners, when they experience physical suffering, they no longer experience mental suffering. The suffering of the body does not lead to suffering of the mind. It is as though they are struck by only one arrow. While fully enlightened beings have eliminated all mental suffering, they still experience physical suffering. Even the Buddha, while still alive, experienced physical pain. In fact, in the final months of his life, the Buddha said that only when he entered the formless meditation would he be free from physical pain. Of course, physical pain can be significant, but it is small compared to the vast amount of mental suffering that has been eradicated. This is why arahants are the happiest beings still living in this world. Despite this, physical pain is still important, and it is one of the key motivations for them to attain parinibbana, the complete cessation of both the body and mind. For example, there is a story in the scriptures. When asked to explain what she was, the female arahant named Varda described the body-mind process called person. Varaja, that an enlightened being can see within themselves as follows. Only suffering arises, suffering exists and ceases. There is nothing but suffering arising, there is nothing but suffering ceasing. The inner vision of the mind of an arahant like this was also confirmed by the Buddha in the Kachanagota Sutta, where it is recorded that he said, What arises is simply suffering arising. What ceases is simply suffering ceasing. As explained throughout this book, because suffering permeates every level of existence, even the life of an arahant, this inner renunciation arises within the mind of an arahant. This renunciation propels the body-mind process of the arahant toward complete cessation and final termination. Thus, it must be reiterated that the full enlightenment of a living arahant does not mean the complete cessation of all suffering. The state of a living arahant is called nirvana with remnants. At this stage, the arahant is in the final phase of life, and at this point, they clearly perceive two things. First, they see clearly the cause of samsaric rebirth. It is the craving for sensual pleasures and the craving for existence. Second, they see clearly that these cravings have been completely eradicated. Suffering is present everywhere, even for an arahant who still experiences physical pain. So why would there be any desire to be reborn into worldly lives filled with suffering again? For this reason, arahants are said to have destroyed all the seeds, all the spiritual seeds, vasanas, that continually recreate suffering from one life to the next. And they know with certainty that all of these seeds have been eradicated. This is the exclusive insight of the arahants. Only arahants possess this highest form of knowledge. For them, the only remaining matter is the short time until they reach nirvana without remnants. Another term for this type of nirvana is parinirvana, the complete extinction. These are the words of a verse recorded about the arahant elder Sankhyathera. I do not long for death, nor do I wish for life. Like a worker waiting for his wages, I wait for my time. Parinirvana. That moment, when arahants receive their wages, is the complete end of all suffering, known as parinirvana. It is the cessation of existence, the end of being. During the period from the attainment of arahantship until parinirvana, arahants provide immense benefit to the world. They set an example by teaching the Dharma, sharing their direct experience of nirvana, and embodying the living Dharma. Among these lives, the 45 years between the Buddha's enlightenment and his parinirvana remain the most glorious era of our world. Those years with the Buddha continue to echo through lands far from the fertile Ganges plain, and their radiance still shines in our present time. 26 centuries later, like a supernova illuminating the heavens across millennia. It has been a long time since our Buddha set the wheel of truth in motion. Throughout centuries of rise and fall, it has been the arahants who have continuously maintained the movement of the Dharma wheel. Just as the Buddha was the first arahant, all arahants simply point the way. And it is up to those who listen to walk that path themselves. The Buddha's path continues to be taught, and many people are still walking it today. There is nothing left. The Buddha and the arahants have completed their teachings and aided all sentient beings in this world. Afterward, all Buddhas and arahants attained parinirvana permanently. The process of suffering arising and suffering ceasing has come to a complete stop, total cessation. What happens next after parinirvana? Immediately after the moment of complete cessation, all-knowing awareness, consciousness, and mind, vijnana, citta, and mano, and all that is known, body, mind, name, form, namarupa, have completely ceased. For them, all expressions and words also come to an end. There is nothing left to say. It even has no meaning to speak of nothing, because nothing is no longer a noun or a label for any entity. How can you know if someone is enlightened? This is a frequently asked question. The answer is, no one can be sure. Only the Buddhas have this ability because it is the sixth of the 10 powers of a Buddha. During the Buddha's time, only the Buddha could confirm someone's enlightenment. Even a great arahant like Venerable Sariputta had to ask the Buddha to clarify this issue. However, while we cannot be certain about someone's enlightenment, we can be sure of who is not enlightened. The 4 stages of enlightenment are clearly defined by specific qualities, and if any of these qualities are absent in a person, that person has not attained that level of enlightenment. Basic signs of enlightenment. For a stream enterer, Sopanna, the basic signs begin with the 4 qualities of a stream enterer. These are unwavering faith in the Buddha's enlightenment, unwavering faith in the superiority of the Buddha's teachings, Dhamma, unwavering faith in the worthiness of respect and offerings of the noble beings in the Sangha, and noble virtue as a crucial quality of the noble ones. The Kausambya Sutta also provides more details on virtuous behavior, noting, if a stream enterer breaks any precepts, they naturally report this to their teacher or fellow practitioner and make an effort to restrain themselves from repeating the offense. Additionally, many suttas clearly describe and define the characteristics of a stream enterer. A stream enterer has eradicated the view of a personal self, meaning they no longer identify any of the 5 aggregates, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness as I, mine, contained within the self, or contained by the self. The wrong view of self, personality view, gives rise to 62 types of wrong views that the Buddha outlined in the Brahmajala Sutta. Therefore, a stream enterer cannot hold any such wrong views anymore. Because of these qualities, the stream enterer is called one who has perfected right view. All stream enterers must realize 2 key insights. There's rebirth and the law of karma. Finally, the attainment of stream entry is a distinct event, meaning the stream enterer can always recall the time and place of that event. Thus, for example, if someone still has a degree of disrespect for the Sangha, doubts the existence of rebirth, or believes that the mind or consciousness, vijnana, is permanent, that person is certainly not a stream enterer. These standards are clearly defined in the suttas. If someone rejects these standards or claims they do not believe in them, it is another definite sign that the person is not a stream enterer, because all true noble ones respect the Buddha's teachings and draw inspiration for practice from them. For a once returner, Sakadami, first, all the signs of the stream enterer must be fully present in the once returner. Additionally, there is a significant reduction in sensual desire and ill will, craving and anger. This stage is difficult to define in terms of the exact amount of reduction, which is why there is little additional discussion about the once returner in this chapter. For instance, in the Anguttara Nikaya, there is a story of 2 brothers, Purana and Isiddhata, both confirmed by the Buddha to have attained once returnership. However, Purana lived a celibate life, while Isiddhata still engaged in sexual activities. It is difficult to precisely define the reduction of sensual desire in these cases. Again, only the Buddha could determine which stage of enlightenment someone had attained. For a non-returner, anagami, the signs are more clear-cut. As with the once returner, all the qualities of a stream enterer must be fully present in the non-returner. In addition, the 2 fetters of sensual desire and ill will have been completely eradicated. Craving and anger have ended. Therefore, a non-returner absolutely no longer engages in sexual thoughts or actions, and any hint of sexual desire in the mind is gone. If someone still shows any signs of sexual behavior or tendencies, that person is certainly not a non-returner. In the Buddha's time, only the Buddha could confirm the enlightenment of others. Even great arahants like Venerable Sariputta would ask the Buddha for clarification on such matters. However, while we cannot definitively know if someone has attained enlightenment, we can certainly know if someone has not attained a particular stage of enlightenment. Each of the 4 stages of enlightenment has distinct qualities, and if any of these qualities are absent in a person, they have not attained that stage, recognizing non-enlightenment. For a non-returner, anagami, if anyone still harbors even a trace of anger, irritation, discontent, or ill will, that person is not a non-returner. For an arahant, the signs are even more evident. First, all the qualities of a stream enterer and a non-returner must be fully present in an arahant. Additionally, there are distinct qualities unique to an arahant, such as the 9 things an arahant cannot do, like accumulating wealth or intentionally killing. Furthermore, arahants possess a natural humility because they have eradicated all 3 types of pride. Another unique quality only found in arahants is fearlessness in the face of death. Arahants no longer fear death. Therefore, if you encounter a great monk who still holds on to personal wealth, exhibits pride, or fears death, you can be certain that they are not fully enlightened. In summary, these are the ways you can determine if someone has not yet attained a particular stage of enlightenment. However, some subtle defilements or wrong views may be so faint and refined that we may not easily recognize them, meaning they have not been entirely eradicated. Sometimes, these defilements are temporarily suppressed by meditation or willpower. For example, If we could observe the mind of a practitioner just after they emerge from deep meditation, their mind might appear bright and untainted, like that of a true arahant, making it difficult to distinguish. And you could be mistaken. For this reason, let me reiterate, only a Buddha can truly know if someone else has attained enlightenment. The rest of us, including ourselves, can only know if someone has not attained a stage of enlightenment based on the criteria we have learned from the Buddhist scriptures. The story of two young boys in a temple. This true story took place about 2 decades ago in a meditation center. Two young boys, with little formal education, approached a meditation master and requested guidance in meditation. After receiving instruction for a few days, the two boys returned to report their meditation progress to the master, and what they said left the master astounded. Witnesses later recounted that the atmosphere in the temple was electric. These two boys, with seemingly extraordinary spiritual potential, had come to the meditation center of the Thai forest tradition, and they appeared to be nearing their enlightenment. Because of the impressive results of their meditation, the master became extremely excited and declared that the two young meditators had fully attained enlightenment. The other monks were equally overjoyed to see that 2 new arahants had appeared in the world. According to Theravada tradition, it is customary that lay people who attain full enlightenment should be ordained into the Sangha, as they could pass away at any moment. Therefore, the senior monk ordained the 2 young meditators that very day. Shortly afterward, one of the young arahants fell slightly ill and was taken to a doctor. The doctor recommended surgery. Not knowing that anesthesia would be used to prevent pain during the operation, the young arahant became extremely frightened. As we know, a true arahant has no fear, especially no fear of death. It became clear that this boy was not an arahant, and when further inquiries were made, it was revealed that the other boy was not an arahant either. Neither of them had attained complete enlightenment. If even a famous, accomplished teacher could be completely mistaken, it is easy for others to be similarly confused. Some people mistakenly believe that someone with great psychic powers must have also attained a high level of enlightenment, but this is not true. For example, the Buddha's cousin Devadatta had extraordinary psychic abilities due to meditation, but he wasn't even a stream enterer. He later lost all his powers and attempted to kill the Buddha. Psychic powers are not reliable indicators of enlightenment. Having psychic powers does not mean one is enlightened. In the Sunakata Sutta, a layperson named Sunakata, after hearing monks declare in the Buddha's presence that they had attained full enlightenment, approached the Buddha to ask whether all the monks' declarations were accurate. The Buddha replied that some were indeed true arahants, but others had not attained full enlightenment as they had claimed. This shows that even during the Buddha's time, there were people who falsely claimed enlightenment. For monks and nuns, making false declarations about their attainments is a violation of monastic rules. Thus, when someone wearing the monk's robe makes a false public statement about their spiritual attainment, they are deliberately breaking a rule of the Sangha, further casting doubt on their integrity. When establishing the monastic code, the Buddha recognized that people tend to overestimate their own attainments. Therefore, monks are advised to remain silent about their achievements and, if necessary, only disclose them to their direct teacher. As one bhikkhuni wisely said, "If you have attained enlightenment, do not tell anyone about it, or else you will spend the rest of your life trying to prove it." When practitioners reflect on their spiritual attainments, they should be clear about the signs and standards of each stage of enlightenment. It is essential not to overestimate oneself. Practitioners should carefully assess which qualities they possess and which they do not, and even if they feel confident, they should wait for many years to confirm whether their realization is truly stable without rushing to make declarations. Future experiences will naturally verify the maturity of their attainment. Continuous practice and experience are crucial, as illustrated by the following real-life example. The story of the monk who wasn't afraid of tigers. In 1980, at Putork Monastery, part of the Thai forest tradition Lum Thin, a monk named Tan Ajahn Juan shared this story with me. One afternoon, a monk ventured into a deep forest near a village. As per custom, the villagers expected that the monk would return to the village the next day for alms. So they prepared food offerings in keeping with the beautiful tradition of dana, offering. Monks often wandered into secluded areas to meditate in peace and spend the night. The villagers warned the monk about a fierce tiger in the forest that had killed many buffaloes and even a few villagers. The monk replied, "I am no longer afraid of death." It was likely that the monk believed he had fully realized enlightenment, like an arahant. The villagers were skeptical. "Show me where the tiger is." "I will meditate there tonight," the monk insisted. The villagers led him deep into the jungle, where tiger tracks were often found. The monk set up his mosquito net and told the villagers to return to the village. Impressed, the villagers left him there. Late at night, the ferocious tiger indeed appeared. The strange sounds gradually became more distinct, followed by the clear sound of the tiger's footsteps. Imagine the scene. The monk, sitting in meditation, likely practicing mindfulness of the breath, following the tradition of forest monks in northeastern Thailand, possibly focusing on Buddha with each inhalation and exhalation. But as the tiger approached, the monk likely panicked and began mentally chanting "ferocious tiger" instead of Buddha. The story goes that the monk fled in terror, shouting "ferocious tiger" all the way back to the village, waking the villagers with his cries of "ferocious tiger, ferocious tiger." According to monastic rules, monks and nuns are never supposed to run. Their robes are gently fastened and not secured with buttons like regular clothing, so running could cause their robes to fall off. However, it is said that this monk ran at full speed to escape, losing his robes and headgear along the way, arriving in the village wearing nothing but his bare body and head. The villagers never forgot the story of the monk who was not afraid of tigers. This example highlights that, despite the monk's earlier confidence, his behavior revealed he had not yet attained full enlightenment. If even experienced monks can misjudge their spiritual progress, it is easy for others to be similarly mistaken. Some people also mistakenly believe that those with great psychic abilities have attained high levels of enlightenment. But this is not necessarily true. For instance, the Buddha's cousin Devadatta possessed extraordinary psychic powers due to meditation, but he had not even reached the stage of stream enterer. He eventually lost all his powers and even attempted to kill the Buddha. Psychic powers are not reliable indicators of enlightenment. Just because someone has psychic powers does not mean they are enlightened. In the Sunakata Sutta, a layman named Sunakata, after hearing monks declare their full enlightenment in the Buddha's presence, approached the Buddha to ask whether their claims were true. The Buddha replied that while some had indeed attained arahantship, others had not attained the full enlightenment they claimed.